Hello and welcome again. This is Daniel Shanahan from New Leaf Data, and I'm testing out this webinar using Ecamm Live. I think there's about a 20-second delay from YouTube, and I'm new to this webinar world. Oh yeah, it looks like I'm streaming now. I'm new to this webinar thing. Let me see. I wonder if I could put a title in. I want to hang out here for a few minutes while people are entering into the webinar. We're going to talk about line level transactions and what happens if you want to have a warehouse change at the line level. As you enter into the webinar, tell me who you are and where you're from. We'd love to see where people are coming from. I thought I could, let's see, it looks like, how can I see those people? Oops, sorry about that. There's my delay. Okay, again, as I mentioned, I'm new to this whole thing, and I'm sure this is not going to be the smoothest webinar you've ever seen by any stretch of the imagination. So I appreciate your patience. And it looks like we have a few people. I can't see. It looks like we have 5 people or 6 people or so on here. But at the moment, I can't see who you are. So just give me a second here if I move that around. Okay, Peter's here. Good, Peter, thank you. From small town in Canada. Good, thank you, Peter. Welcome. And let's see where I could put this. Okay, let me go through. It's interesting. Obviously, if the whole live webinar thing is an interesting dynamic, but it's interesting to me because in order to check and see what's happening, I have this 20-second delay, and trying to figure all that out is a little bit. Patrick is here. Welcome, Patrick. I had the pleasure of speaking with both of you today, so I'm glad you're here. And I'm going to wait for just a little bit. I see some people are still joining into the webinar. So I'm going to wait for just a minute. I better turn that down too. Yes, Peter says lots of small towns. That's right, there's lots of small towns. I'm in Sylvania, Ohio, which is right outside Toledo. Looks like we have about 9 people so far. I'll give them a few more minutes. And let's see, I know I'm going to need one more piece. There it is. Good. Okay. Wonderful. Let's see. Dale is here from Dale. Maybe Dale is from Atlanta. Dale's from a big town in Georgia. So welcome, Dale. And good. Okay, so I'll get started on here. I think this live webinar, again, I'm new. It's going to be buggy, and I apologize for that. And I'm still used to presenting live to a camera, essentially. So a lot of work for me to do. What I want to do is I want to go over this process. I think it'll take 15 or 20 minutes. We'll go a little as deep as we can in that time, and then I'll open it up for questions. And so the idea is that this is part of the FM Inventory Starter. FM Inventory Starter is a free inventory starter solution that you can get from fminventorystarter.com. And then there are some other modules, which are courses, that can help you build that out. One of the modules has to do with transactions. Transactions inventory transactions are different than database transactions, and I write about that in the course and about those differences. So it's important to know the differences. I'm not talking about database transactions. That's a different topic. Inventory transactions are how you keep account of items that are coming into and out of your organization. That's an inventory transaction. There's several ways to add a transaction to the transaction table. And I go through all of this in the course. And just to give you an overview, because this sets up what I'm going to talk about today. So 3 main ways, I don't know, I'm not claiming that these are the only ways, but 3 main ways are you can add a transaction at the line level, you can add a transaction at the record level, and you can add a transaction in a batch level or backflushing. Manufacturers would be familiar with that term, backflushing. The line level is what we're going to concentrate on now, and that is when you make a change to a line, all of those changes are reflected in the transaction table. To compare that, when you talk about a record level transaction, what happens is you can open up an order, let's say a sales order, for example. You can open up a sales order, you can add sales order lines, and you can make any number of changes. You could say, maybe you're on the phone with a customer and the customer says, I want a red widget, a blue widget, a green widget. You know what, I don't want a green widget, so now you have to delete the green widget. And instead I want 2 red widgets, so you have to change the quantity of the red widgets. So all of those things in a line level transaction, all of those changes would be reflected in the transaction table. In a record level transaction, none of those are reflected in the transaction table. And so you have this freedom to move around and add, update, and delete as much as you want. And then at the end of that process, you have some kind of posting process where you say, the order is complete, we're going to move it on to the next phase. In the sales order phase, the next phase would be a picking phase. And then you move it to a different status, and then you lock it down. You'll have some internal rules on if you need to make changes, but generally speaking, it's done. And then the transaction only happens at that time. So that gives you an overview, a very quick overview of transactions. And we're not talking about record level transactions. We're not talking about batch level transactions. Right now we're talking about warehouse level transactions. I'm going to go to my screen now. In the warehouse level transaction, what is new, what we had before is that we have a warehouse on the header level. The warehouse is on the order level. And what would happen is that you would make a change, but only the change for the ordered quantity or if you deleted it. But in this new file, I've added a new field here, a warehouse field. And so now that we have both an ordered field and a warehouse field, now we have a new set of questions that we have to ask. So let me put this aside for a moment. Bring this up. Once we have on a line level transaction where we're adding a transaction for every addition, update, really create, update, or delete on the line level, we have to manage 5 different scenarios. And these are the 5 scenarios. We're going to add data to the quantity and add a warehouse. We're going to update the quantity, but we're going to not do anything to the warehouse. We're going to update the quantity, and we're also going to update the warehouse. When I say update, that's making a change. Or we're going to not do anything to the quantity. Quantity is going to stay the same, but we are going to make a change to the warehouse, or we're going to delete the line. All of those are going to have a ramification on the transaction table. This one is an interesting one because this one is the theoretical one where we're doing an update on both the quantity and the warehouse. In really what we're going to do in the script, anyways, the way that I've done it is it happens in two processes. Really what happens is one of the things gets updated, the other stays the same, and then in that process the other thing gets updated. And so essentially what we have is this. This is what we need to code. And that's already been coded. I should say, so I forgot to say this again, I'm new to this whole thing. Stick around for the end of the webinar. I don't think the webinar will be very long, but stick around. I have a code for that transaction course, and the code will be a discount code. Yep, so that I'll say that, have that as enough. Okay, so let's do this, and let's open up a okay, so what I'd like to do now in the webinar is take you through that process of what happens when we add the information and delete the information and change it. So I'm going to update. Let me do a quantity update here. Here's our item. We're going to work with this item. So this obviously could have been set up beforehand. I apologize for that. Let me set this up. What I'm going to do is I'm going to reset these values. Do that off screen. Okay, so that's what we have for this item. We have 400 items for this SKU, and I could come in here and I could take a look and I could see in these different warehouses. So I have two warehouses. I have a warehouse in Durango, Colorado, and one in Sylvania, Ohio. And then in the Sylvania warehouse, I have two different places. So what I want to do is I want to pull values from there, and we'll change those places around. Okay, so I have that. I'm going to do one more thing here. What I want to do is on this one, I'm going to get rid of that one. So I'm going to delete. Okay, so I just deleted this this sales order line, and we'll start fresh here. And then on these transactions, I'm going to delete everything here. So that's not so great. It's a demo file, so I've deleted this this line too. In fact, let me get rid of that SKU. What is that? This one. Okay, so we'll clear that out. So what we want to do is we want to add our record here, and we want to see how that updates in the transaction table. And so if I can get this so I can see everything. So my SKU 70902, and I'll order 20 of those. And now nothing happens after I've ordered 20. The presumption is you need both a quantity and a warehouse. And so what the script does, the script is checking to see that both of those fields have a value. The warehouse doesn't have a value, So nothing happened in our transaction. We'll give it a value. We'll say we'll pull that from warehouse 1. And here's our value. Now we have a transaction record that tells us for this item, here's our SKU, at this time, it got pulled from this warehouse at this location. And we have a movement and it's outbound. Okay. The customer calls and says they don't want 20, they want 15. So we'll change that to 15. Now we can change that, and now we have a quantity adjustment. So now, I didn't highlight this, but what has happened is our quantities have updated. And in fact, when I go here to the quantities, you could see that it's in our ready to pick in our Sylvania warehouse. That's our warehouse number 1. We have 15. I could change that warehouse then to warehouse 2. Now I get two additional transactions, and that's remember this table. What we really what we did was this one. We did this one, but we had to. Yeah, I didn't explain this very well here. When we do this, really what we have to do is we've taken these 15 out of warehouse 1. What we need to do first is we need to put these 15 back into warehouse 1. We need to go over to warehouse 2 and then draw 15 out. Yeah, so that's not quite reflected there, but it is reflected here in our transaction. And you can see that here. We have a change of warehouse where we initially had 15. So now we have a negative value. We put those 15 back. Now we've gone to a new warehouse and a new location in that warehouse, and we've taken 15 out. So now when we come here, we should see 15 in the Durango warehouse, and we should see 0 in the Sylvania warehouse. And that's what we see. Here in the Durango warehouse, we have 15 that are on order, or allocated here in the allocation column. And then over here where we had 15 for the ready to pick in Sylvania, that's now 0. So what we did in that process is we put our warehouse 1 back, and then we took it out from a different one. And so those are the different ways. So we've added a quantity, we've added a warehouse, then we changed the quantity. That's this quantity adjustment. Then we changed the warehouse. Now the last thing we could do on this line is we could delete the line. And in that line we could I just got confused. One thing we could do, let's do one more thing. Let's say that we want to take 10 from this warehouse and 5 from another warehouse. So really we've done it all, but we've done all that already, but this gives us 2 order line records to see how that would play. So we would say we really only want 10 from there, and then I'm going to come down here to 70902 and say I'm going to grab that other 5 from warehouse 1. And all of this stays the same. We still have 400 on hand, we still have 15 allocated, and we still have 385 available, even though this has changed quite a bit, and that's been reflected in our transaction. And we could see that here on our quantities. So now we have our allocations have been divided up, 10 from Durango and 10 from Sylvania. The last thing we could do is we can delete a line. And so I'll do that just on this bottom one. I get a verification, do I really want to delete it? And yes, I do. And now I get a new transaction. It's important that deleting a line means adding a transaction so that we can track. The transaction table is really a log table, so we can see what has happened. And so now we could track the life of this sales order and this process through this transaction table. So all of that is new that's a new downloaded file on the transaction on the transaction course. And let's take a look at well, before we do that, let's take a look at the scripts on this. The first thing to notice is that there's 3 places that the scripts are called. One is on the order field, one is on the warehouse field, and then one is when it's deleted. There is a trigger here. This SKU trigger is simply saying take the SKU and go and grab the item ID. I could use a value list to grab the item ID and only show the SKU, but I've chosen another method. So that's the only thing this script is doing. I won't worry about that one too much. This one, this script trigger is order quantity and warehouse, and I want to know what the portal, when I add here, this portal has an object name that I use here. And this should be the same. And then oops, that's not a trigger at all. That's a button. So all of those are delete portal. That's so that's a little bug in there. That's so I'm passing this parameter, but I don't. The way in my naming convention, what I have is excuse me. In my naming convention, I have the parameter that needs to be passed in parentheses, and so this doesn't match up. So I have to take a look at that. It was always the risk when I decided to do a webinar. I thought that might happen. And I'll obviously change that. Yeah. So it's looking for a portal object, and I'm using, this is a custom function from 6 Fried Rice, and I use that to pass this parameter. Okay, so let's take a look at that anyways. Order quantity. And here it is. Really, what should happen here? So this is legacy. I'm passing a legacy. So. Real quick, just to go through the script, is I pass a series of parameters, and I'm getting these parameters again using. In this case, I'm using this custom function from 6 Fried Rice, but in some of these other cases, I'm just grabbing the variable. I'm just writing the variable based on whatever order line record I'm in. From a big picture, if you stand back, instead of going down line by line, from a big picture, it's might be helpful to see what's happening here. There's really 3 groups of things happening here. And here's the first group, is to delete the record. Here's the second group, which is to update the record. And then here is the last group, which is to add a record. I see Peter asked a question, is it safe to say that transactions are strictly for audit logging and not for determining quantities, and that quantities are stored values within the SKU itself? It's a great question, Peter. There's a number of ways to track quantities in an inventory system. If your inventory system has one warehouse And in that one warehouse, you have one location. You don't have any overflow, and you're not concerned about whether it's at a dock or in a bin. You just know it's at the warehouse. Then you could keep that quantity on the item table. But it's not scalable. So if you add another warehouse, or if you do want to have different locations, then you have then it gets more complicated on where to store your quantity. The way I do it in FM Inventory Starter is I have a quantity table that I store it in different locations, and those are number fields. They're not calculations. And so to get back to your question, the transaction and the quantity table, the transaction table and the quantity table are pretty tightly coupled, so that when an action happens in one, it happens in the other. But it's all scripted, and one of the things I have to do in the quantity table is I have to check to see if there's a lock on that record. So hopefully that let me know if that answered your question, or if you need some more clarification. And if you do have a question, if anybody has a question, feel free to add it to the comments, and I'll answer them as I can. Let me go back to the script. So there were the three major parts that I outlined there. And let's see, I'm not really sure how deep to go into this. And in fact, I think I'm not going to go too deep into it, because I'm not sure the value of getting into the weeds. I think it's better to give a big picture and see if there's any questions that come out of that. So the big thing is that this is a new addition to the transaction course, and that with the scripts that have been added or modified, that you can now create transactions on a line level for both a quantity and a warehouse. So let me stay on the line for just a few minutes here and see if anybody else has any questions about that. And it looks like it might be pretty quiet here, so and that's fine. I have let me add this to the screen here. Okay, I see a few more questions coming up, but let me point out where you can get this. This is at FM Inventory Starter, and it is down here in the inventory transactions. And here's I have some information on what the inventory transactions does, and you can see where the chapters are. There should be another chapter. Patch level. Here we go. Chapter 6, and this is the one that is added. I will. I will get to those questions in a minute. I want to get to this. Make sure I get this out. The course right now is at $149. I have a discount code. And let me make that a little bit bigger. I think what I might be able to do, again, I'm new to the webinar piece, but what I might be able to do is add this discount code to the description in YouTube once the webinar is over. So if you add this discount code, you will get $100 off. So a pretty big discount, and so it's only $49. And that price is only until tomorrow at 5 o'clock. So that's those pieces. Let me go back to the questions. Peter asks, yes, answers my questions. Good. Follow up, how would you track quantities at locations of individual lots? Oh, of individual lots of items, right, for a kitchen. Just another join table. Individual lots. Are you talking about, Peter, when you say lots, are you talking about lots as in manufactured lots? So you've manufactured a batch of a product, and so you're managing the lot? So if you could clarify that, that would be helpful too. And let's see, Patrick is asking how to add this new function to FMIS. That's a great question, Patrick. These, the FileMaker inventories, the FM inventory starters are a series of files that are modules, and the idea is that you can add whatever module you would need. So obviously, if you're in manufacturing, you might not need. If you're in a distributor, you might not need a whole manufacturing setup. The problem with doing it that way is that FileMaker is so tightly coupled. The database, the layout screens, and the scripting engine are so tightly coupled that it's hard to have separate modules or separate libraries. So what I've tried to do is have these modules that when you choose one of these things, for example, a line record, what you would take is you would take this FM inventory starter file, and then you would import the scripts from this other file that you would need. It's important to import rather than copy and paste. Patrick, I know you know this already, but for anybody else listening, it's important to import rather than copy and paste, because when you import, the import will tell you if you have any errors, and then you can track down those errors. When you copy and paste, you don't get a message about the errors. So that's how you would do it. Hopefully that answers that question. You would import that into the FM. What you have to do is you have to, because all these modules are in FileMaker files, you have to have one of them that's going to be your main file. You're going to build up this one main file. So you have to identify whichever one you're going to use. And so I think it makes sense. The one that I'm keeping up to date as much as possible is the FM inventory starter base file. And then the idea is that people can import things into that file. So let me know if how that works for you, Patrick, if that answers. Peter says manufactured lots either produced items or suppliers items. So you're right. So you have a supplier who lets you know what the lot is. Okay. So now back up to your question, Peter. How would you track quantities and locations of individual lots of an item? You would track those when you receive them, Peter. So let's take. It's a similar process. Let's take for. Let's set aside manufacturing for the moment. It works in a similar way. Let's set aside manufacturing and just focus on distribution. So you are receiving goods in a particular lot. And so when you order your order to your supplier would say, we want 100 widgets. And they send you 100 widgets, but they send you 100 in two different lots. You would receive those in two different lots. And in that process of the receipt, you would have two transaction records, and the transaction would track the lot. So hopefully that helps there. That would give you, and then as the lot moves through your system, for example, you're going to sell a widget, you would need to have a place on your sales order where you're selecting a lot. You can't just sell a widget if you have multiple lots. You have to clarify which lot you're using when you sell it. By doing that at the receipt and then at the sale, and which will also tell the picker what to pick, that gives you traceability. And then it works the same way when you're doing manufacturing, but it's obviously not. The manufacturing can receive lots, but also the manufacturing is making lots. And so in that case, you might be working on a different type of order. Some people call it a manufacturing order. Some people call it an assembly order. Some people call it a work order. For quality control, for quality control tracking and for recalls. So that would give you the traceability that I mentioned. So hopefully that makes sense, where you would track the lot. Again, if you ordered 100 and you received 100, but in 2 different lots, you have to mark those as 2 different lines on your receipt. And I think I have that in one of my demo files on FileMakerInventoryResources.com. There's a lot of free information here. And Peter, I know you're familiar with this site, but for those who aren't, this article on receiving goods might be helpful, and this article on lots and batches. And then what is my demo file? I don't remember, to be honest. What do I have for a demo file? I thought I had one for receiving. I think these purchase order ones would be the ones you want to look at. Okay, let me get this out of the way and get that discount code back up here. Again, this is the discount code that will be available until Friday. And let me come back down. Pascal, welcome, Pascal. Is this webinar being recorded? I think so. That is my plan. If you missed the beginning of this webinar, Pascal, my disclaimer is that it's my first webinar ever, and I'm stumbling through it with the kindness of my listeners, hopefully. So it is my plan that it will be up on my YouTube website. Okay, any other, and I'll stick around a few more minutes if anybody else has any other questions. I'm happy to answer those. And it looks like it's pretty quiet now, so I will presume that covers everything. If you have a question that you weren't able to ask here because of the time delay, the gap, or because of the presenter's error, or maybe you thought of something afterwards, you can always email me. I'm at daniel@newleafdata.com. Let me put that down here. You can email me your questions. I'm happy to help if I can. Let's see. I am from Belgium and would like to view the webinar tomorrow. Yeah, that would be fine, Pascal. Just be aware that the discount code does end on tomorrow at 5 o'clock Eastern Time, which I think is Greenwich Mean Time -4. So there you have it. Thank you all for thanks for my first webinar, and I think it went okay. I don't think I bombed, but certainly room for improvement. I really appreciate you showing up and asking the questions. Again, if you have any other questions, let me know at daniel@newleafdata.com. I have more webinars planned, and I'll let you know in the future. Thanks for now. Bye-bye.